Hi everyone, back again today with another video. I'm on vacation this time. Close that up, cut off the glare a little bit. I'm in South Carolina, but I'd prefer to be in Florida, and the reason I mentioned Florida is I'm going to be talking about the Tampa Bay Rays today. Reacting, but also maybe giving a perspective, sort of as a sort of a rival fan, but also looking at what they have going on, as well as discussing why I think they're linked to Ketel Marte and what that would mean for the lineup. So first off, a few days ago, recording this on Monday, the 22nd of December, and on the 19th, the Rays made two trades. One was a 3-team deal. The other was a straight-up division rival package. So let's start with the Shane Baz one, because I think that one's a little Baz, however you say it, Baz, I guess, Shane Baz. That trade, so they sent Shane Baz to the Orioles and got back Michael Ferret, Slater DeBrun, Austin Overn, Caden Bodine, and a Comp B pick. Or is it A? I think it was Comp A, actually, in the 2026 draft. Now, I could go at this from an Orioles perspective, but instead, this is a Rays video, so we're going to talk about it from a Rays perspective, where what needs to be understood here is that Shane Baz, despite being talented as he may be, hasn't truly put it all together and has had his health issues. And if that sounds similar to someone on the Orioles, well, who was on the Orioles, it sounds similar to Grayson Rodriguez, doesn't it? I think the difference is that they're about the same age. I think Baz is about a year older, but the Rays, unlike the Orioles, although that could be changing now, have for a long time now been about producing pitching and then kind of struggling with hitting. And they'll have the occasional star player, but it's like maybe a couple. So like on this latest Rays team, and mind you, this was also a Rays team that was playing in a minor league park, which has its pros for, in particular, the offense, but also the cons for the pitching and defense. So when you see Junior Caminero hit like 45 home runs, that's right? Yeah, I didn't write that down, but I'm pretty sure that's right. You got to also take into account that some of those wouldn't, you could almost say somewhere between 5 and 10, I'd imagine, wouldn't actually be home runs if they were playing at the Trop. Likewise, with a guy like Baz, his pitching numbers look much worse, as in he had like over a run difference in ERA, home versus away, as in obviously at home he was worse because you're playing in like a spring training / lower minor league stadium. And it's also hot in Florida in the summer, as opposed to climate-controlled conditions inside in a bigger park. So keeping that in mind, really what it comes down to with Baz is they wanted to retool the system even further. And I think that can go one of two ways. Either they could trade for the guy I'm going to probably use as the title in this video, Ketel Marte, or they could just have a really stacked farm system. It really depends what they want to do. They could always fill second base with either Taylor Walls, Richie Palacios. They could move Carson Williams over there, although that maybe be a waste of his arm. Or they could go get a guy like Willie Castro or Luis Rengifo. I think both of those are bounce back candidates, and if the team is not playing well, but the guy's playing well, he could be flipped. That's what cheap teams like this do. So let's briefly touch on the other trade, which was the Rays sent Brandon Lowe and Mason Montgomery to Pittsburgh. Oh, and Jake Mangum. Forgot about Jake Mangum. Got back from Houston Jacob Melton and I think it's Anderson Brito. If that's not Anderson Brito, then I can be corrected there. But I write down the first initial, not the whole name, to save space. But anyway, that trade, it's two highly rated prospects coming back. Essentially, Melton replaces Mangum in the outfield as lefty bat who plays good defense but doesn't really hit as well, which they have a lot of those at this point. Mason Montgomery was an all right reliever, not really going to be missed. And then obviously Jake Mangum maybe fills an outfield spot for Pittsburgh, which both Tampa and Pittsburgh actually have a number of outfielders who aren't the best with the bat, but play decent enough defense or are fast, or both. Really, it comes down to Brandon Lowe. Pittsburgh's taking a chance of they make this trade. Well, they only really lost Mike Burrows anyway, and they have a number of pitchers. So I think Pittsburgh, at least for 2026, easily wins this trade. Maybe longer term if Brito pans out, which with the Rays, who knows, he could end up being, like in 2 years or so, one of their top 3 or so starters. That's entirely possible, which is why the Rays made this trade. And then with Brandon Lowe, he was making $11 million. His infield defense at second base had been declining, like bad, to the point where it's kind of like Bo Bichette and CJ Abrams at short. He's one of the, maybe he's not quite that bad at second base. Maybe that was just a down year, but he's been trending downward. He's getting older. He swings and misses a lot. He's in his last year of his contract, and we know the Rays get rid of guys when they get expensive and come toward the end of their deals. So I knew he was getting traded. I had that written down on my paper. I had the Pirates, Reds, Giants, Mariners, and Royals as possible destinations, with the Pirates as number 1, and that's where he went. Otherwise, let's take a look at what else they have going on. As I mentioned, they just injected into their farm system 6 new guys, a catcher, 3 outfielders, and 2 starting pitchers. I don't think, other than Melton, none of those guys are ready. Although maybe you could see Fourette by the end of, sometime in 2027, we'll say. I'm going to guess like halfway to the end of 2027 if he stays healthy. Bodine, probably similar, maybe end of 2027. They do need a catcher, so even if they got a guy like, I'm not going to say JT Realmuto because I don't think they would go that high, but if they got a guy like Victor Caratini or Gary Sanchez or someone in Christian Vasquez, someone who's getting older but isn't, well, none of those guys are particularly good other than maybe Caratini. But anyway, the point is they have a guy, a switch hitter, pretty good behind the plate, young. They have that. They also have Keegan and Driscoll as catching options, who are maybe a little closer. Bodine only got drafted last year, or in this past draft, I guess you'd say. So there's that. Jacob Melton, again, as I said, could either be in AAA or come up and take one of Simpson or Lowe's spot. What's weird with them, and again, this is kind of where I look and think, could this lead to another trade? And that's actually a great time to segue into Ketel Marte. If, let's just say, there's an interest with any of Josh Lowe, Jake Fraley, or, as I said, Jacob Melton in Arizona, where they have a guy in Blaze Alexander projected to play left field with Lourdes Gurriel out with a torn ACL, could that be a piece to add? In particular, Melton, where you have such control for a whole 6 years? Because that's what's weird to me. You have Cedric Mullins, Josh Lowe, Chandler Simpson, Johnny DeLuca, Jake Fraley, Tristan Peters, Richie Palacios. They could all play the outfield. That's a lot of guys who can play the outfield. Plus, coming through, Theo Gillen's far off. He's an A ball, but Xavier Isaac, Trey Morgan, Brendan Summerhill is, again, lower down, but as well as Aiden Smith. They're lower down, but they're not kids like that. Like, Summerhill went to Arizona, so he might be in the minors for 2 years. But anyway, the point is, they have a lot of depth, they have a lot of prospects, they have a lot of quality prospects. They don't necessarily have as much pitching at the major league level anymore, having gotten rid of Baz now, Bradley, Springs, Littell. Who's the other one? I guess that was it. But my point was that they do have money. Let's be real here, they're not broke. If they needed to trade, say, Pepio, they could go get a guy like Littell, bring him back, Eflin, bring him back, and then maybe a guy like, who's an example, like Tyler Mahle or Chris Bassett or Chris Paddock or Nick Martinez. There's a lot of pitchers out there. They're not high-level pitchers as such, but they're able to eat innings and are not terrible. They've gone and gotten Steven Matz. Getting back to Ketel Marte, just so I can get back to this. Right now, the lineup's okay. It's projected Chandler Simpson, Yandy Diaz, Jonathan Aranda, Yner Caminero, Josh Lowe, Cedric Mullins, Taylor Walls, Nick Fortes, Carson Williams. In some order. I think Carson Williams would probably go right after Mullins, and then maybe put Walls last because he's quicker than Fortes. But the point is, Mullins didn't have a great year. Lowe had a bad year. Walls is a limited hitter. Fortes probably should be a backup catcher as it is. And then Simpson, he's a contact hitter and he's fast, but you don't really want him leading off. You'd rather have him hitting ninth. But again, this is the Rays, and they're one of those limited offensive teams. But what I'll say, when you lose Brandon Lowe, who better than Ketel Marte? That would actually be an upgrade, and they're a similar age. And it's not like Tampa Bay doesn't have plenty of room to spend money because they've been clearing money lately. They didn't bring back Pete Fairbanks. They've gotten rid of Brandon Lowe. They got rid of Springs. Baz wasn't going to make much, but they got rid of him too. They have a lot of young guys who are basically making the minimum. I think if you were to look at the rotation, I mentioned Pepio, I mentioned Matz. There's also Rasmussen, McClanahan, if he ever can be healthy, Joe Rock, Joe Boyle, Jesse Schultens, and Ian Seymour, as well as Yoendris Gomez. That's a number of guys. I mean, let's be real here. I don't think you'd want to rush any of the guys they just got in those two trades, but looking at it, I think they could put together a package for Ketel Marte. He slides into that 2-hole that's vacated by Brandon Lowe. You put Chandler Simpson back ninth, and then you just figure out. Actually, even if Yandy Diaz got traded in that trade to get Marte, because I look at the Diamondbacks again and say, what if you could give them a pitcher or two young pitchers? Maybe not even go from your rotation. So go Yandy Diaz, maybe Jacob Melton or one of the other outfielders. So that would be filling in two gaps in that Diamondbacks lineup where they have basically Adrian Del Castillo as the DH right now and Pavin Smith at first. That's a pretty huge upgrade to go from Del Castillo to Diaz, since Diaz has been DHing more anyway. And then to add an outfielder, since, as I said, they have Blaze Alexander in the outfield. He's really an infielder. To put him back in the infield, move him to third, have Jordan Lawler at second or something like that. There's ways to navigate that lineup where it makes sense for both sides. And with Marte, there are some Hispanic guys in the Rays lineup, a couple Dominicans, in particular Caminero. And with Marte, it's not like you're paying him a lot of money. I mean, when I was talking, well, actually, I didn't release that video yet, but when I was discussing the Red Sox, one of the points in favor of him, as opposed to, say, Bregman, is that for the next couple of years, he's making something like 16, 20, and then like 12 million, as opposed to Bregman's probably looking for 30 per year. And then you compare that to production-wise with Brandon Lowe, if he's making 16, Marte, and produces at a much higher level, as in Brandon Lowe might have been like around 2 WAR in 2025. If Marte's at like 6, that's a huge difference, and you're not paying that much more. Plus, if you traded Diaz, Marte could play second plenty, but then DH. You could put Walls and Williams in there. Maybe you could move Simpson back to second base. I don't know if that's something they've thought about, but if his outfield defense isn't good enough, you could still have his contact. You could have his hit tool and speed in the lineup and have him play second, maybe. Still have Taylor Walls, who is easily, at least defensively, a starter up the middle. Carson Williams is your number 1 prospect. You have plenty of outfielders. Cedric Mullins just came in. Jake Fraley recently came in. They just got Jacob Melton if they were to keep him. So there are options. And like I said, they have a pretty good farm system. Oh, I'm not going to mention that point, but basically, yeah. I was also going to say with the Diamondbacks that Gurriel and Locklear are out for a number of months. Locklear is a first baseman they got from Seattle for either Naylor or Suarez. I forget which one exactly, but both of them are out anyway, so they're kind of limited with their bats at the moment. Yandy, big upgrade. He'll play some first. And then once his contract, I think he has 1 year plus an option, which a cheap team like the Diamondbacks, they'd love to get that off the books. Or, sorry, the Rays, not the Diamondbacks. It's been a long video already. I've actually talked for 17 minutes. Anyway, if they don't get Marte, like I said, I could see them getting a guy like an older guy like Todd Frazier, or Adam Frazier, not Todd Frazier. Good Lord. Mine's starting to go. All these names. I'm thinking guys who would fit into that role. Also, again, I said Willie Castro, Luis Rengifo, someone in that mold. Kind of cheap. Take the cheap way. They don't want to long-term necessarily block people, but wouldn't fans come out to see Ketel Marte and Yunior Caminero? That's a great dynamic duo right there. Plus, if Yandy stayed somehow, that's a great trio. Get the pitching rotation on point, and that's a really competitive team, I think. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Lips are very chapped. I'm enjoying the beach, though. It's nice. But anyway, Rays fans, if there are any of you out there watching this video, let me know what you think. Do you want Ketel Marte? What do you think of these trades? Other fans, what do you think of what the Rays are doing? That's it for this video. See you in the next one. Peace.